This is Dr. Jerome Corsi, and today is Friday. It's December 8th, 2023. Thank you for joining us here on TheTruthCentral.com. We're doing a podcast every weekday. The first story I want to cover has to do with what's going on with the Israeli war. Israel is now ramping up the strikes both in the north and in the south. So Israel intensified. Reuters was reporting that Israel sharply ramped up the strikes on the Gaza Strip, pounding the full length of the Palestinian enclave, an expanded war, and Washington is beginning to object stronger and stronger, saying that the Israelis need to stop. The Israeli militaries on Friday said, Friday, of course, in that part of the world is long into the Friday here. It's something to deal with the whole globe, in the Orient, Sydney included, in the West, in that part of the world, the Pacific, is already going into night when it's a day here of the morning here of the day they completed in Australia. So it's that people have no concept of the enormous size of the earth in relationship to human beings. At any rate, the Palestinians are saying that Israel reported had 450 strikes, air attacks against targets in Gaza from land, sea, and air. I guess it's all three, land, sea, and air, in the past 24 hours. This is the most since that truce collapsed last week, when they exchanged prisoners for at least for a few days. But what's the case now is the whole length of the Gaza Strip is under Israeli attack. First, the Israelis took out this Gaza City in the north. Now they're going after a major city in the south, and increasingly there's no place for the civilians to go. And I'd say about 90% of the civilians in Gaza have probably been displaced and are now homeless refugees. There were 2.3 million people in the Gaza when this war started. So that's 2.3 million people have now been completely disrupted. And of course, the world's going to complain and shout and cry about that, while ignoring the damage that was done to start this with that vicious Hamas attack. I continue to say and remind everyone that wars don't settle problems. Wars create new problems. All you're doing here is creating another generation of hate on the side of Hamas, another generation of fear and hate on the side of the Israelis. And at the fundamental base, I think Israel now recognizes that Hamas has not been compromising, despite being given control of the Gaza, and is still determined to destroy Israel. This two-state solution that our genius Secretary of State Blinken is proposing is a dead duck, when one of the sides, Hamas, will use a two-state solution, creating a Palestinian state, which they virtually had in Gaza, in order to be a staging for destroying Israel, which is what Gaza turned out to be. And of course, Thomas White, who's the Gaza head of this United Nations RWA, which is an organization that the United Nations have embedded within the Palestinians. I've talked about that yesterday. It says civil order is breaking down in the Gaza. Yeah, well, no, wondering when he got clued in. So the streets feel wild, particularly after dark. Some aid convoys are being looted, and UN vehicles stoned. Society's on the brink of full-blown collapse. Yeah, well, I guess that was predictable, wasn't it? When you have this kind of an attack from Hamas, and Israel's going to retaliate. I think the difference between this incursion into Gaza and previous Israeli incursions into Gaza, this one's being done with a vengeance. I don't think Israel's going to stop because the United Nations is wringing their hands and crying for the Palestinians. And the problem here is that the Palestinians now have been backed this as Hamas group has been backed by Iran. You've also got the Palestinian Authority, which goes back to Yasser Arafat. Arafat was an Egyptian. He was Muslim Brotherhood. He was not Palestinian. And again, the propaganda, the disinformation about the Palestinians is enormous because the world supports this Muslim terrorist organization for reasons that are largely beyond me, except that the world has largely gone mad on this. And the college campuses are the same. I see even TikTok is starting to celebrate some of the rhetoric put out by Osama bin Laden and some of the angry letters exchanged when Osama bin Laden was saying that the Saudis were not strict enough in jihad, and they were accommodating to the West, which meant that they were no longer truly following Islam. Well, Osama bin Laden was Saudi. He was kind of a misfit in terms of the Saudis. He left Saudi Arabia. He ended up in Pakistan and other countries, and he developed Al-Qaeda. So this whole Al-Qaeda move, which was the beginning of another wave of radicalization of Islam, and now you've got European cities which have an increasing Muslim population, and the Muslims are not integrating. They're wanting to establish Sharia law. And on United States campuses, I would say the majority of students protesting are protesting for Hamas. So the anti-Semitism against Israel, I don't think has ever been more intense since World War II. And what you're seeing is Israel now perceives an existential threat, especially with Iran in the wings, being supported by John Kerry as Secretary of State under Obama, and now Blinken with the new releasing of the sanctions against Iran, allowing Iran to re-enter the oil business, recover billions of dollars that were previously sequestered by the United States on these sanctions. So Iran now has money, and we are shipping them more money on given the green light to proceed with ramping up the terrorism, as we see with Hamas. Hamas has also established much of its headquarters in Qatar, and so therefore, just rooting out Hamas in the Gaza will not fundamentally solve the problem. Hamas can be expected to rise again, although it will take some time. I think Israel here trying to make sure that the clobbering of Hamas, the destroying of their tunnels under the Gaza, their rooting out of their leadership in the Gaza, killing them, will be a setback for Hamas. And the United Nations pleas of stopping the violence are again an indication that the United Nations is siding with the terrorists. Again, these are, for any of us who followed these developments for a quarter of a century or more, I think the Middle East is at a more dangerous point today than it has been, perhaps since the creation of Israel in the 1940s, 1948. The anti-Jewish sentiment to destroy Israel and the possibility of doing so is on the rise, especially with the United States support. The Democrats are completely hampered by the extreme left of the Democratic Party, which is neo-Marxist, wanting to conduct a cultural revolution in the United States with all this woke, divisive nonsense, the attempt to radicalize gender and race in order to divide people, and the proposing of this agenda with the corporate media, as they call it now, controlled largely by a CIA-developed ideology. The top of the CIA, the top of our military, have been penetrated by woke ever since Obama began firing any general who was a true military general. He wanted a group of political generals in there, just like Soros has wanted a group of political attorney generals and a political justice department going after the conservatives in the country and wanting to break the back of anybody who is in self-sufficient status, who doesn't want to live on the grid, and saying that we're all white supremacists. This divisiveness, and that's I've written about this extensively in The Truth About Neo-Marxism, Cultural Maoism, and Anarchy. I encourage you to get the book if you want to understand the ideology and the world in which the left lives, which is a neo-Marxist world that is determined to destroy capitalism and the modern industrial state, that wants to break the back of the middle class in the United States, reduce the power of the United States, and have us eat bugs, live in 15-minute cities, have our cars be able to have electronic switches so that the government can turn them off. I mean, all these things are control features, which the World Economic Forum, who's standing in the background, is architecting. Once the United States power is diminished sufficiently and the control measures put into place, the World Economic Forum will begin getting rid of the woke, because what we have here is what happens in every one of these communist takeovers. Once the oligarchy, the small cadre of communists take over, they destroy the people who got them there. And that's happened in Russia, it happened in China, it will happen here if they do gain power. I want to stress with this war that it is at a critical point where Israel is at a tipping point. If they continue for a few weeks or months longer, they will deal a mighty blow to Hamas. And the world is going to try to prevent that, UN especially. And you're going to see Iran in the background calculating whether or not it wants to ramp up the violence by unleashing Hezbollah against Israel from Lebanon. Chris, do you want to comment on this first part?
It's annoying to me, but it's probably disheartening to many others to see Western nations collectively, not everybody, but many of them, come down hard on Israel simply for taking a strong stance, defending itself. And they're probably going to come down even harder on Israel when they tell you, hey, there's no way you're going to tell us what to do with the West Bank and the Gaza Strip afterwards. It's a collective mindset that Israel either shouldn't exist or needs to give its land to people who honestly have been harboring others who have terrorized and murdered Israeli citizens. How can you do that? And then the nerve of Joe Biden, I believe we said this yesterday, I'm going to say it again, the nerve of Joe Biden to make a demand that Israel stop the war in January because he says to do so, like he has any political pull anywhere, but definitely not Israel, is abhorrent. Is abhorrent. Abhorrent. That's better.
We're both having trouble. It's Friday. We're both having trouble with words.
It's the morning. I haven't had my coffee yet.
I have. And by the way, we do have gear up on the, take a look at the gear.
Yes, that's
got
a cool
mug.
and
yeah, it's a cool mug. I like it.
And when I say gear, there's a section on the top of our website. I'm going to pull that up. This is the story we just discussed. But on the top section of the website, you're going to see sections for topics we discussed. The podcast, you can get past stuff. You can get the history sessions, the Secret War and Cash podcast, Dr. Corsi's podcast, and this is where it is. Shop. You can click that, and you'll find some nifty gear like the mug that Dr. Corsi, and I have a mug too. But again, right. I haven't had my coffee yet.
There it is, right there.
Get a mouse pad.
They're good. They're good mugs. I like them.
Yeah. The logo is so cool. You got to have one of these.
It's a cool logo. Thank you. It's a cool logo. Okay, let's get back to the news here. The Biden's. It looks like finally some things are going to happen with the Bidens. I think. First of all, there's a new indictment of Hunter Biden. It was filed by the Department of Justice in a California court, a federal district court. I'm not sure why they chose that court, but at any rate, instead of filing the case in Washington. But at any rate, the indictments against Hunter Biden, there are 9 new federal criminal charges, 3 felonies, and these largely involve tax issues that Biden was engaged in a 4-year, this is from the indictment, a 4-year scheme he took about $1.4 billion in self-assessed federal taxes that are owed for the years 2016 through 2019. And he lived a lifestyle in which he was embellishing himself with babes and drugs and putting it on his We have now all the laptop with all the videos. So these are 3 felonies and 6 misdemeanors, and there's no plea deal on the table. An indictment was filed in the U.S. District Court for the Central District of California and alleges that Biden was involved in a 4-year scheme to evade paying at least $1.4 million in federal taxes between 2016 and 2018. The charges claim that rather than filing his tax obligations, Biden spent substantial sums in what the indictment describes as an extravagant lifestyle, including membership in sex clubs and over $188,000 on adult entertainment, prostitutes, and drugs. The document contends that Biden's expenditures escalated with his income, highlighting in 2018 alone he spent over $1.8 million on various expenses, cash withdrawals, payments to women, clothing, accessories, miscellaneous retail purchases, and the funds were not allocated towards his tax obligations. There's no plea deal on the table. The Biden lawyers wanted the plea deals to be very extensive, and when that got exposed by one of the judges, the Department of Justice was forced to pull back. So I think these indictments may be the first attempt to seriously bring Hunter Biden to justice. At the same time, the House of Representatives, the House Republicans, have now issued a memorandum. Actually, they put forward a proposal, which is a resolution to move forward with the Biden impeachment inquiry. There's an 14-page resolution that authorizes the investigation. And it says directing certain what the chief allegations are going to be, that the Bidens were taking on bribery money, received more than $24 million for Biden and his family from foreign nationals, and that's a lot of money. And also he received Chinese laundered money, there's Ukrainian money, and essentially now they've got a lot from what Comey has done in his investigation in the House. They have a lot of documentation that the Biden family was operating as a crime family, with Hunter Biden selling the influence access to Joe Biden as either vice president or president in return for huge amounts of money from oligarchs, many of whom were criminals, in order to get favorable policy decisions from the U.S. government. We're seeing massive corruption. I'm seeing people again doing comparisons between where we are in the fall of the Roman Empire after Caesar, that we see the elite in power having enormous corruption, which is not put in check. It is rampant, probably extends deeply into the Senate and the House. I'd like to see Mitch McConnell investigated for his wife's millions of dollars from her family in China. Clearly, that family is only alive because Elaine Chao is able to influence Senator McConnell to do what China wants done. That's how the world works when it gets corrupt like this. That's the reality. Elaine Chao, she fled from communism, that she was Secretary of Transportation or whatever. Isn't she? No, look, China understands how to play the game of corruption, and China and Ukraine are playing it. I think one of the reasons the war in Ukraine is still going on is because the corruption continues to flow. And why shut down your best money laundering country in the world when you can keep it going with putting in more money for fighting a pointless war, a war that is not going to solve anything? Now, the Gateway Pundit is running a very interesting story today that our military are saying that, threat that if we don't get the additional funding Biden wants for Ukraine, we'll send in U.S. troops to help Ukraine. Well, that's insanity. Well, that'll only prompt a direct confrontation between United States troops and Russian troops. If you want World War III to begin, that's a good way to do it. And I think these insane neo-Marxists who are running our country would invite war because their depopulationist agenda is becoming apparent. And I've said this through 2 books now. I said it through the Truth About Energy, Global Warming, and Climate Change, when I went through the history of the climate change movement and showed how it started with the depopulationists in the 1950s. Too many people. We got to get rid of people. So we are coming to a crisis point, and the next series of articles I'm going to talk about will show you the crisis point in this global energy. Energy, without cheap energy, we do not have a modern industrial state. You can get this book free. How the Coming Global Crash Will Create an Historic Gold Rush. I co-authored it with Dean Heskin, head of Swiss America. It's not a hard book to read, but it's going to open your eyes to what's going on economically. You can get the book free by calling this toll-free number, 1-800-519-6268. 1-800-519-6268. That's Swiss America. We talk to Swiss America. You can also get this Walking Liberty $50 offer, which is a great deal. Chris will show it to you in a minute. If you go up to the sponsors at the top of the Truth Central homepage, you pull down Swiss America, you can see that the Walking Liberty $50 offer is still available. Chris is showing you how to navigate the homepage right there. And you go to Swiss America, you get the form, fill out that form, and talk to Swiss America. You can buy 250 of these coins. They're circulated, but the value of silver in them, they're just about charging you what the coins are worth today in silver. And it's a good deal when you realize what the price of gold and silver are going to now. Let's just see where they are today. Quickly pull. Yeah, gold is trading at $2,043.80 an ounce. That gold has broken its all-time high this week. Gold is breaking out over $2,000 and is holding over $2,000 today for about a week. If that continues, you're going to see gold begin to have an historic rise. Get a free copy of the book. Take a look at it. Educate yourself. So 1-800-519-6268. That's the toll-free number to call to get the free book. Now, the next few stories here have to do with the European Union. The European Union is facing tremendous economic challenges, and the EVs under Biden are being pushed in the United States. So with the European Commission, which I think ought to be disbanded in the process of breaking up the EU, probably be good for everybody to get rid of these globalists. At any rate, that's not going to happen today. The European Commission has an action plan to make sure the electricity grids will operate more efficiently. What they're talking about is that they don't have enough charging stations across Europe to expand dramatically the number of electric vehicles. So the EU is authorizing legislation, including putting local level regulations and requirements to have a charging port hooked up to the grid and available conveniently on major highways throughout Europe. The problem is it takes years to upgrade the grid. There are fundamental problems with it. So the EU plan to upgrade the grid is networks will have to accommodate a more digitized, decentralized, and flexible system with millions of rooftop solar panels, heat pumps, and local energy communities sharing their resources, more offshore renewables coming online, more electric vehicles to charge, and growing hydrogen production needs. Okay, now I'm going to reach back in my bookshelf here and pull a couple of books that I'm really intensively reading these days. I'm going to recommend them to you. One is pretty technical. Hold on. This is a short book here. This is not very long. It's called The Unpopular Truth, and it's about electricity and the future of energy. And it's a very good book, very thin book. It's technical. But what they're pointing out, and I can read any part of this, it's actually a brilliantly written book. But what they're saying is that there's two limiting factors for wind and solar. Number one, the wind doesn't blow all the time and the sun doesn't blow all the time. And they have what they call natural capacity factors. There's some charts in here which you cannot really see greatly, but they're trying to show you which areas of the world have a natural capacity for either wind or solar. So it says in other words, where your wind is blowing a lot, that's got a high natural capacity because you can capture some of that wind and make it. Where the wind doesn't blow very much, that's got a low natural capacity. Okay, so for a photovoltaic park, a PV park, the natural capacity depends entirely on the intensity and duration of the sunlight. Well, no, that's a revelation, which is affected in turn by seasonality, cloudiness, day and night. Nights when it's dark because that yellow orb up there is not a tree ornament, it's the sun. It's the source of our heat and light, despite what the global warmers would like you to believe. And the ability to maintain the photovoltaic panel's surface's transparency under local ambient conditions. In other words, dust in the Sahara. So you might get a lot of sun in the Sahara, but if the dust is covering the photovoltaic cell, you're not going to have the capture of the electricity. Wind turbine forms have a natural capacity factors depend on the site's wind speed and the duration and saturation speed of the wind turbine. So in other words, how much wind there is and how the turbine is built. It's saturation, how much energy it can absorb from spinning. The capacity factor of wind turbine is determined by the number of hours per year in which the wind farm operates at or above saturation wind speed. Okay, that should be apparent. If the design wind saturation speed is low, the wind farm produces little energy, even for a high capacity factor. Typically, wind saturation speeds are determined by a mathematitic formula. But in other words, what they're saying is if you put in a wind turbine that's not very effective in a high wind zone, you're not going to capture much of the natural capacity. The second problem is that the laws of physics dictate that the reality of wind and solar is that you have to store them in batteries, and that loses energy. So you're capturing a very, very small percentage of the electricity value of light and wind because the technology necessary to capture them limits the ability to convert that into electricity. So wind, maximum 60% of kinetic energy in air that a blade can capture for conversion to electricity. That's limiting factor. Modern turbines do not exceed the 45% conversion to electricity. Turbines only reach 30 to 40% when brand new due to continuous degradation each year. So we want to get a good wind turbine, it's only be capturing 30 to 45% of the available wind, and then it's got to be stored in a battery. Photovoltaic, there's another law here that limits their use. Maximum 33% of incoming photons can be converted into electricity in silicon photovoltaic sites. The state-of-the-art single-layer PV photovoltaic cells achieve over 20% conversion to electricity. New non-silicon options will have similar boundaries and are far from economical. Multi-level photovoltaic cells have reached about 45% conversion, but none are as durable as silicon. So you've got following: space requirements, material input, recycling needs of wind and solar are underestimated. Wind, cement, steel, balsa wood, fiberglass for airfoils, energy and material input. That's for wind. Solar, silicon derived from silicon oxides, quartz silver, steel, aluminum, energy input. So the nature-derived capacity of renewables, which is limited by the natural availability of wind and solar, cannot be compared to utilization of a conventional power plant, which is limited by technological outages or reduced consumption requirements. So in other words, what you're dealing with the hydrocarbon fuels is you can combust them. They're readily available, and you capture all the energy that's stored in the hydrocarbon fuels. I'll try to read one more section. Because when you deal with the storage issues, it also compounds just how energy storage. Okay, here, I'll try to find a good. So energy storage can never overcome the inherent physical challenges of wind and solar. Okay, so you've got low energy density and high space requirements. These wind and solar do environmental damage to plant and animal life, and they have negative climatic impacts. Low energy efficiencies, short lifetime, high material input requirements, recycling challenges, resulting in low energy return on investment, which is EROI, like how much electricity do you get from the investment, the return on investment. ROI is return on investment, accounting for all embodied energy of the total system. They also say this hydrogen idea is not a good idea for hydrogen to become hydrogen to become a fuel. Hydrogen is hard to compact, and you're finding that the storage requirements of all these renewables really means you've got a very efficient conversion into energy. Okay, I want to talk about this book too, and Plimer's done two books. This one is excellent, Heaven and Earth. Ian, Plimer. He's twice won Australia's highest honor, the Eureka Prize. Is professor in the School of Earth and Environmental Sciences at the University of Adelaide. He's the author of 6 other books written for the general public, in addition to more than 120 scientific papers. He's brilliant. And I'll pull one of his other books here from my shelf. It's this one here. It's called The Green Murder. And I can pick any page here. Not one green, this is page 157. Not one green activist prediction about the world being wiped out by environmental pollution, famine, or overpopulation has occurred. In fact, the opposite has occurred. Climate scientists' predictions in the 1970s about a pending ice age in a few decades were all wrong. Many of the same people who made the predictions about a forthcoming ice age are now making predictions that the world will end by global warming. Green activists' predictions about drought were hosed down shortly after by massive rains and flooding. A number of green activists are advocating show trials followed by death sentences for scientists who don't agree with the global warming hysteria. They also argue that global warming is so great that democracy will have to be put on hold. I mean, this is insanity. And it's very well detailed here. And I think if you'll take time to read this, almost every paragraph of this book is important. Page 211. The year 2050 is now the new D-Day. Coastal flooding will rise 1 or 2 feet due to global warming. The number of fish and wildlife will decrease, and hurricanes and storm surges will become more common and severe by 2050. Rising sea levels from global warming yet again are going to wipe out major coastal cities in the U.S., China, Vietnam, Iraq, Egypt, and India by 2050. There is no record of such rises in extreme events during the last 5 warming cycles over the last 5,000 years, so why should it happen in 2050? Good point. Good question. Let's just pick another. Okay, that's anywhere in the book. Okay, here. The science in here is extremely good in terms of looking backwards and forwards. So the study of meteorites show that there are 3 main types: iron, and stony meteorites. It's concluded meteorites derived from fragments of a protoplanet between Mars and Jupiter that was impacted and broken up, which I've said since I was a child. It's obvious the asteroid belt is formed as a broken up planet. The iron was the core of the planet, and the stony material was the mantle. The planet was separating into layers and a crust had not formed. During its history, the Earth separated into an iron core, a stony mantle, and a thin crust of a skin on the top of the mantle. Rocks of stony meteorite composition have been found on Earth. These are in areas that had been pushed up from great depths. If this were the case, then perhaps laboratory experiments on the melting rock of stony meteorite composition could help us determine how a basalt formed at a great depth. He is actually brilliant at understanding these, and I've begun communicating with him in Australia. I would hope that we could perhaps collaborate on something together. I truly admire every one of his books and recommend them to you. Okay, and let's cover one more story before we wrap up here today. This whole EU idea of upgrading the grids is going to cost $1 trillion and may never happen. This economic reality is that we have passed under this investment reduction. Investment reduction, it's what it's going to do. The Inflation Reduction Act. There are subsidies which will not expire until the electric industry carbon emissions fall by at least 75% below 2005 levels, after which they will gradually decrease. Even the most optimistic forecasts by the U.S. Energy Information Administration show this will not occur at least until 2048. Thus, the subsidies for wind and solar will continue unabated for decades. In total, the subsidies will far exceed what the U.S. government spent in today's dollar to combat the Great Depression. So it turns out that we're going to be spending, despite spiraling deficits, almost $2 trillion in the current fiscal year that ended this past October. Green subsidies will be financed with still more government debt. With the increase in interest rates, financing costs will soar, adding an estimated $500 to $800 billion to the bill. So this is a formula for spending trillions of more dollars on technology that will not work, pushing out investment into hydrocarbon fuels which do work. And it's an ideological agenda. When you get to the bottom of this, what you begin to realize is that the people in power today are intentionally putting in place depopulation measures, destruction of the economy measures, destruction of the middle class measures. Why? Why? Because they believe they have to destroy the modern industrial state, which has produced the greatest middle class the world has ever known, instead of expanding the formula that made America great, instead of expanding freedoms and having a free market enterprise system go worldwide. In a free market system, wind and solar would play a minor part because they don't work. And the only reason they're going to work is because there's billions and trillions of dollars being thrown at them, which will be stolen by Obama and Biden cronies in cylinders and other projects which go bankrupt and nobody goes to prison. Where'd all the money go? If you think this is economic stimulus, this is not. It's corruption. It's crony capitalism. And it's appalling to see that the Justice Department, finally taking some action against Hunter Biden, is more involved in running in policing a transgender parade run by the military down Fifth Avenue than it is in defending Israel, defending the United States of America, ending the endowments to these universities, which are nothing but breeding grounds for hate America. We're in a dystopian period of time. Chris, I'm going to wrap up this episode. Do you want to comment before we do?
Of course. And again, it's been said many times, even the World Economic Forum has kind of revealed a bit about this, using climate change and using fears about what young people were kind of had what they had drilled into their heads when they were younger. Oh yeah, young people when they were younger. Anyway, right. The idea, I know
we get the point. We get the point.
Again, before the coffee. The idea is that they're trying to use this small bit of information and try to use fear to control the rest of the world to push their agenda. And this is why whenever you see these people and those at COP28 and everybody else and your Greta's of the world doing the opposite of what they say as far as energy use. Well, John Kerry's, of course, one of the biggest culprits. The idea is, they're not telling you the truth.
Yeah, Obama's got a house in Martha's Vineyard.
That's right.
Right by the beach. I mean, he's not worried about the seas rising.
He might be a little bit, but the fact is he can afford to get out of it. It's all the energy use in those houses, right?
The hypocrisy is massive. And the Bible says, fear not, which is what we have to resolve and steel ourselves not to fear. In confronting these people, the only antidote to this is the truth. And the truth is these people are insanely lying. They're shoving schizophrenia down our throats, saying, you can be whatever gender you want to be, no matter how insane it is. You can have men and women's bathrooms, no matter how insane that is. Men and women's sports, transgenders, which are men with male genitals wearing female attire and adopting their bodies to be more female-like.
Did you hear what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said about that the other day?
No.
She tries to pull this angle now during a House hearing about protecting women's sports. Cortez tries to pull the angle. Well, this means that anybody who comes into a locker room now has to have their genitals examined, and it was awful. This woman, first off, she sounds like a child trying to ask adults to extend her bedtime every time she speaks. Okay, especially in these House hearings. The fact is, she's trying to find anything to push a social agenda, which is almost at this point laughable, yet still legitimized by the far left.
Well, and the question worldwide, and in Europe it's being asked, and it's got to be asked here, is do you really want to live under these people? These people are going to do is going to destroy everything good about America. So I'm going to wrap it up by saying that in the end, God always wins, and God will have his day here too. This place was created by God. It's a spiritual existence. It looks physical, but it's not. It's fundamental. It's all energy. And God can pull the plug on this place anytime God decides to do so. And the Old Testament is filled with examples of God's judgment coming down on the Israelites for creating golden calves, and Moses comes down from Mount Sinai and smashes the Ten Commandments in anger, seeing how little faithful to God the Israelites were in that era, or how faithless we are to God today. Without God, human beings become beastly. And in the end, God will win, but we will go through the judgment of God. And the judgment of God is upon us when we see the insanity that's ruling the world. Justice Department is more intent to censor Christians or those who want a Latin mass among Catholics than they are to go after terrorists. You know that we are economically engineering a crash. And that's why, one last time, get this copy, free book, Talk to Swiss America. Get your retirement savings, your IRAs, and your 401ks out of the stock market. 2024, they will try to prop up the economy, they being the Federal Reserve. But at the rate in which we're printing money, the bond market is already demanding higher and higher rates to sell these bonds. And this is not a good sign for future economic development or maintaining an economically growing society. We're going to have credit crashes starting in 2024. I don't know how long they can prevent a crash. But get the free book, 1-800-519-6268. And join me in 2 Chronicles 7:14, which I think is the only real solution left, which is to get on our knees and ask God to forgive us for letting the world get into this condition. Take responsibility for it. God will hear our prayer and heal our land. This is Dr. Jerome Corsi of the Truth Central. We're broadcasting in a lot of different places. You can see them on the upper right-hand corner and throughout the website, thetruthcentral.com. We're on Rumble. We're on BitChute. We're on CloudHub. We're on a lot of different sites. And also audio on Apple Podcasts, iHeart. Chris is showing you now the upper right-hand corner, and then our social media is on the site. Chris is showing you there over those colored little boxes or balls are where you go into to get the various social media we're on. We've got the books. We've got the half-dollar offer. My book on the Live Longer and Better, which will be featuring in 2024, which is going to be a telemedicine website. I'm going into telemedicine very strongly again. It will be getlongevitymeds.com. You can also take a look at Habla con un MD, the Spanish website we're about to launch, HABLACONUNMD.com, means speak with a MD. Habla con un médico, say in Spanish. It'll be for Spanish-speaking residents of the United States, regardless of documentation, to speak with Spanish-speaking doctors by telephone. And we will be introducing this program through Pastors My Vital C, which I've been taking every day for now 5 years, and I swear by it. And I think it does have longevity properties. We'll be working with Chris Burries, who's my co-author on Live Longer and Better. You can get that book on Amazon. You get all my books on Amazon, and we will be selling signed authors' copies of my personal inventory in 2024. Thank you for joining us. This is Dr. Jerome Corsi. Today is Friday, December 8th, 2023. We will be back on Monday. Thank you for joining us. God bless.